We'll post the presentation to the town's website on the Natural Resources Division page as soon as it's available. And with that, I will turn it over to Alex.
Great. Thanks, Delia. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So we've got a slide presentation to share with everybody tonight. As Delia said, it's great to see so many people turn out to talk about Warner's Pond this evening. I'm going to try to keep this relatively brief. There's going to be a lot of information on the slides. I'm not going to read through everything, so we want to leave some time for Q&A, and then, as Delia mentioned, interacting with these boards that you see around the room.
Yeah.
So feel free to ask any questions or mention any comments that you might have at the end of the slide presentation. There'll be some time for questions and answers. Can we advance to the next slide, please? Okay. So as Delia mentioned, we have 3 goals for the meeting tonight. The first is to review the background information of the pond and the management alternatives that have been evaluated to date. The second is to discuss the reasons why the Division of Natural Resources believes that dam removal is the best option for Warner's Pond. And then the third is to gather feedback from everybody who's in the room and on Zoom tonight. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so if you've been to these meetings before, some of this information is probably going to be stuff you already know, so I'll try to cover that relatively quickly. But again, feel free to ask questions at the end. So Warner's Pond in West Concord was created in 1857 when a dam was built on Neshoba Brook. The pond is about 48 acres in size, plus its 3 islands that together are about 7 acres. The maximum depth is about 12 feet, but most of the pond is pretty shallow, only about 5 or 6 feet or less. And the pond and the dam are owned by the town, which also owns 3 different public access locations around the shoreline of the pond. There's been a long record of sort of a slow decline in water quality in Warner's Pond over the past several decades. One of the earliest records of that we have is from the early 80s, a report from the Commonwealth that indicated the pond was undergoing an advanced state of eutrophication, which is basically a state characterized by poor water quality, really dense growths of aquatic plants, and sediment filling in the pond and reducing water depths. And so those are really the main issues that are kind of facing the pond now. Things have only gotten worse since then. So really shallow water depths and the dense growths of 3 different aquatic invasive plant species are sort of the main issues of concern, I think, and those have resulted in sort of 3 main problems. One is impaired recreational value and aesthetics. The second is degraded habitat for native fish and wildlife. And then thirdly, impaired water quality. Next slide, please. There we go. Okay, so what is causing these problems in the pond? It's really kind of 2 factors that are working together. So one is Warner's Pond just happens to have an extremely large watershed relative to the size of the pond itself. And so the image on the top there is Warner's Pond is inside that red circle, and the yellow line is the watershed of the pond. And so what that means is all of the streams and brooks and rivers that are within that yellow line that spans, I think, 6 or 7 municipalities, all flow into Warner's Pond. So all of the sediment that's being carried by all those waterways is flowing into Neshoba Brook in a state where if there were no dams, basically all that sediment and nutrients would continue flowing downstream. And if you've ever seen an aerial image of the Nile Delta or the Mississippi Delta, and you see that big fan of sediment going out into the ocean, that's all the sediment load that the streams are carrying. And so in the Warner's Pond watershed, because we have a dam, the material that's being carried downstream can't continue into the Assabet River or the Merrimack River, so it just ends in the pond and is kind of accumulated there over the years. And so the main issue with that, number one, is that it's just filling up the space of the pond and lowering water depths. And the second issue is that all of that material contains nutrients, phosphorus being the one that's the biggest concern, and that is really what's driving the growth of the aquatic plants in the pond. The 2012 Watershed Management Plan found that the annual average phosphorus loading is more than 6 times higher than the critical load, and that just means the critical load is where if your phosphorus loading is less than that, you're probably going to have good water quality, and if it's more than that, you're probably going to have problems. And the sampling that was done for that report found that the average loading is more than 6 times higher than that level. So that's sort of the root of the issues that we have at Warner's Pond. So what can we do about this? So the town has invested a lot of time and effort over the more than 20 years to look at a variety of different management options, and some of those have actually been implemented. And they can really be broken out into 3 main groups. So first, things that are kind of directly managing aquatic plants. Second, things that are more focused on managing nutrient loading and sediment in the pond. And then thirdly, just sort of miscellaneous other approaches. And so we're going to look at those on the next few slides, but to kind of cue that up, for a little context, the sort of questions to be thinking about when we think about potential management options are these. So kind of 2 main questions. So first, is it effective? So that means how likely is the management option to actually solve the problems in the pond? Does it address the actual root causes of the problems that we're seeing, or does it only focus on the symptoms of those problems? That's an important distinction. And then secondly, is it realistic? So is it affordable? Can it be implemented? Is it actually practical to try to do this? Can we get permits to do it? And then how likely is it that it would result in unintended negative impacts? And so I mentioned there are sort of 3 main groups. So first, kind of direct management of aquatic plants. So there are a number of different ways that aquatic plants are managed in water bodies. Off the bat, all of these things are kind of focused on reducing plant growth, so they're not going to affect the water depths in the pond in any way, just how much plant growth we have in the pond itself. So a common method there is herbicide treatments. The town undertook herbicide treatments in 2011 in Warner's Pond with, I guess, limited success, you could say. And there are several things that are going on in Warner's Pond that make herbicide treatments challenging. One of the main ones is that the flow through the pond is actually quite rapid. Again, the 2012 Watershed Management Plan found that the amount of flow through the pond is actually replacing the entire volume of water in the pond every day. So the way that herbicides work is you put them in the water and you kind of want them to stay there because they have to make contact with the plants over a somewhat long period of time. So if they're all just getting washed out, they're not really effective. The other consideration there is typically herbicides aren't just you do it once and then you're done. It's often a long-term commitment, often with multiple treatments a year for several years. So other things here, hand and diver harvesting. So hand harvesting for water chestnut has been ongoing for many years at Warner's Pond with some limited success. Diver harvesting is really expensive. That would mainly be focused on milfoil and fanwort as an alternative to herbicides. But again, a long-term commitment. Mechanical harvesting is another approach that's used in some cases, but really isn't appropriate here because it can actually make conditions worse when you have fanwort and milfoil. And then lastly, hydro raking, which is sort of similar to mechanical harvesting, but really isn't, again, effective against milfoil or fanwort and can also be really expensive over a somewhat large water body. Next slide, please. So there's even more aquatic plant management options. And so one is drawdown. And this has been mentioned in the past at some of the meetings about Warner's Pond. So we pulled together this figure just to show. So, you know, the first thing to know about drawdown is in the past, DEP has permitted deeper drawdowns of up to 6 feet, but now they're really limiting that to no more than 3 feet. And so the figure here is showing the areas of the pond that are 3 feet or less in depth, and those are the areas shaded in brown. So just right off the bat, if you were to do a drawdown at Warner's Pond, if you got a permit to do that, the areas shaded in brown are the only areas that would even potentially be affected by that. And I say potentially because it's really very dependent on weather and a variety of other conditions in the pond as to whether drawdown would be successful in any way or not. It's very hard to predict. It really depends on weather conditions during the winter, how cold it is, how much snow there is. The mucky bottom of the pond is something that would work against drawdown because basically the plants would be in water through the winter even though they're exposed, and the point of drawdown is to try to dry the plants out and kill them. So when the pond bottom is really mucky and wet like it is at Warner's Pond, drawdown is not often effective. The other things on this slide really just aren't practical for Warner's Pond, so I won't spend too much time with them, but benthic barriers, they're basically giant tarps that you put on the bottom of the pond. They're really not meant to be used over large areas, and the other two items really just aren't feasible, but if anyone has questions, we can certainly talk more about those. So the second group of management options is things that are focused on managing nutrients and sediment. So watershed-based approaches. So this covers a really wide array of things, both structural and non-structural solutions. And the point basically is that only about 3% of the pond's watershed is actually in the town of Concord. You can see on this map, again, we're showing the watershed in yellow, the town lines are in white, and you can see, 97% of the watershed is outside of Concord, which really limits the ability to do anything to impact nutrient and sediment loading to the pond. So nutrient inactivation basically is adding some kind of a chemical to the water body to make the nutrients that are coming in less available for plants. This is really typically used to control algae blooms. It's really not effective for controlling plant growth. It's also very expensive and wouldn't address the shallow water depth, so really isn't something that would really solve the problems in Warner's Pond. Dilution, again, this is something that's been evaluated, but really the pond already has a very high flushing rate, so I mean, this basically entails just adding fresh water to flush out the nutrients, but it's just not really practical to do, and it's just here just to show that it has been thought about in previous studies, and if folks have other questions, we can certainly discuss it more. But that leaves us to sort of the big item under this category of options, which is dredging. And so what we've learned over the past couple of years is, based on the designs that have been done, moving sediment out of the pond is cost prohibitive based on the town's current available funding, and keeping sediment in the pond, while potentially achievable cost-wise, really doesn't provide a lot of benefits and has significant logistical and permitting hurdles that it would have to get over. So in general, dredging is one of the most expensive things that you can possibly do to try to manage a lake or pond. And even though it would provide benefits over a relatively long period of time, it doesn't address ongoing inputs of sediments, so the pond would slowly fill back in over many years. This is just a summary of the two different dredging approaches that have been conceived over the past few years. So on the left was sort of the original limited dredging approach that was permitted and put out to bid, and on the right was the more modified approach that was evaluated in the alternatives analysis. And so the table on the top just summarizes both of those. So again, the original idea, the dredge footprint was just over 6 acres, which is about 13% of the open water area of the pond. The modified dredging was just over 8% of the surface area of the pond, but all of that material would have been placed elsewhere within the pond basin. So you'd basically be deepening some areas and making other areas more shallow. And then, so the third category, other approaches, these are sort of miscellaneous things. Aeration basically is putting in fountains. Again, it's been evaluated, but just really isn't designed to address the problems at Warner's Pond. It's mainly, again, used for addressing algae blooms in small ponds like at golf courses. Fish passage facility, is kind of targeted towards one specific problem. It's certainly not as effective as dam removal for providing fish passage and wouldn't address any of the other issues in the pond. And then lastly, the no action alternative has also been evaluated. That's pretty straightforward, and don't need to go into that too much. So to summarize, other than dam removal, the town has evaluated 15 other options for managing Warner's Pond over the past over 20 years. And some of those options actually have multiple different kind of options within them. So the actual number that has been looked at is actually even more than that. Some of these have been implemented, mainly those related to aquatic plant management, and others either aren't suitable for solving the problems here, would be impractical to try to implement, or are cost prohibitive, or all three. And at the bottom of the slide here, we have a couple of links to the two primary reports where these 15 other options are discussed in detail. So if you'd like more information, that would be a great place to look. We also wanted to mention this other idea that has been put forward by a member of the community, because it is something that we are going to be looking at as we go forward. Basically, this idea, my understanding of it is that the pond would be dredged, and the dredged material would be used to construct a series of berms, which would isolate the pond from Neshoba Brook. It may or may not involve removing the dam. And as I mentioned, we'll be providing more analysis on this from an engineering and ecological perspective. I think there are a number of concerns about the feasibility of it, but that's all we'll really say today. So changing gears a little, so we want to talk a little bit about the benefits of dam removal. And so those are just summarized on this slide. We'll talk more about those on the next few slides. So why does the Natural Resources Division think dam removal is a good idea for Warner's Pond? So a number of reasons. One, oh, no, you're fine. So one of the biggest ones is improved water quality. So it's been shown in a number of cases and through a lot of very clear data that dam removal improves water quality in aquatic systems. Basically, by removing the dam, you're increasing the flow rate, which reduces water temperature and improves dissolved oxygen concentrations. Those are two of the most important factors for assessing water quality and health of the water body for aquatic organisms. So dam removal, without a doubt, is going to enhance water quality in Neshoba Brook. The image on the top is just showing DEP's water quality classification maps, so you can see that the brook, both upstream and downstream of the pond, is a Class 2 water, whereas the pond itself is a Class 4 water, meaning that it's impaired. So other benefits. So next, widespread elimination of aquatic invasives. So the three main species we have, water chestnut, fanwort, and milfoil, wouldn't survive in the areas of the impoundment if the dam were removed. New invasives growing in those areas is certainly a concern, so would have to be something that's carefully monitored. But the good news is that the invasive that we'd be most concerned about if the dam were removed is purple loosestrife, and that can be pretty effectively controlled through loosestrife beetles, which are a very inexpensive and easy method that's been used in Concord in the past. So next, very significant benefits to wildlife habitat. So removing the impoundment would restore vegetated wetlands over more than 30 acres of the formerly impounded area, which provide higher quality habitat for more native wildlife. Related to that, DER's online mapping tool indicates that removing Warner's Pond would reconnect more than 17 miles of upstream habitats in the system, which would be great for fish, both diadromous fish and local species, other aquatic life, and recreational opportunities. And so on that note, the town believes that removing the dam would enhance recreational opportunities in the system by providing more opportunities for paddlecraft use. The community survey that was put out earlier this year indicated a somewhat low level of recreational use of Warner's Pond, and people who responded to that survey indicated that, at least some of them, that part of the reason why they weren't recreating at Warner's Pond was a combination of poor water quality or lack of recreational options that were of interest. And there are certainly opportunities for improving recreational opportunities in Neshoba Brook as part of a dam removal project, and that's one of the things that we're certainly looking for some community input on. So related to that, this just shows the areas of both Neshoba Brook, which is kind of on the right-hand side going up and down, and Fort Pond Brook, which is kind of going left to right, that would be opened up if the Warner's Pond Dam were removed. So more than 17 miles until you get to those two other dams. And you can see there, there was a dam on Fort Pond Brook that was removed in Acton only a couple of months ago, opening up a little bit more river mileage. And so a few other things. So the dam, of course, although it's relatively new, is still sort of a piece of critical infrastructure that the town has to manage and maintain and repair. And so eliminating the dam would eliminate ongoing costs to do that, would remove a safety hazard. The dam is a significant hazard dam as determined by the Massachusetts Office of Dam Safety. We believe that removing the dam would reduce flooding risk for homes and streets upstream of the dam. So this image is showing during a 100-year flood event, areas that would be flooded if the dam were there. So, you know, if that were to happen now, we think that if the dam were removed, the 100-year floodplain would actually shrink, and that some houses and some roads that are in the floodplain now would not be in the future. And we're doing some modeling right now to get a better handle on that. And then lastly, because there is a significant amount of grant funding available for dam removal projects, it's, you know, we're hopeful that if the project did move forward, much of the cost could be offset by securing grant funding. And so to wrap up, we just wanted to give a few examples of some recent dam removals. So I just mentioned the River Street Dam in Acton on Fort Pond Brook was removed very recently, back in September. The total cost of that project was $2.5 million, and the town was able to secure $1.5 million of that in state funding. That's just a photo of the site just before dam removal, I think. The High Street Dam on the Town River in Bridgewater also was removed this past summer. In that case, the total cost was over $8 million, but the town was able to secure funding from a number of sources and offset the entire cost so that local taxpayers did not bear any of that responsibility. So Sucker Brook in Pepperell was removed a couple of years ago, and we included this just to show. So this is on the left immediately after dam removal, and then a year later showing the vegetation growth that had grown in. That was without any planting or seeding. That's just the native seed bank in the pond sediments waiting to germinate once the water was lowered, and several other that are currently in planning. And so I just said to wrap up, but I was mistaken. We have a few more slides. But now to wrap up, we just had a few more slides to share on some misconceptions that we'd like to clarify. So just to put the dam in a little bit of historical context, you know, this isn't exactly to scale, but in the grand scheme of things, the pond has only existed on the landscape for a very short period of time in the context of the glacial, since the glaciers have receded from eastern Massachusetts. So just wanted to set the stage with that. So this next few slides is just going to list some misconceptions about dam removal and how we'd like to clarify those. So the first is that if you remove the dam, the pond is going to become a mud puddle, and that's just not true. As we've seen in many other projects, when dams are removed and the land is exposed, there's a rich seed bank there, and those seeds will germinate and the land will vegetate itself very quickly. This is another recent dam removal in Lancaster. Well, actually, that was in 2014. But you can see the series of photographs from the top left immediately before the dam was removed, the top right after, and the bottom left 3 months later. The whole impoundment has vegetated in, and then 3 years later, all the bank areas and all the former impounded areas are looking really good. So next, so the idea that removing the dam will somehow make flooding worse. So we talked about this a little, but you know, there's two things. So there's downstream flooding and upstream flooding. And so dam removal typically doesn't have any effect on downstream flooding. The dam really isn't retaining floodwaters in any way, so removing it isn't increasing flood risk downstream. And on the flip side, on the upstream side, we actually think there'd be a benefit to removing the dam because the 100-year floodplain is being artificially expanded by the higher water levels. And so by removing the dam and lowering water levels, the floodplain should shrink. But as I mentioned, we're working on confirming that. So the idea that the pond is providing really great wildlife habitat and that habitat would be destroyed by removing the dam. And so this is kind of related to that timeline that we just had on a couple slides ago. So native wildlife have been living in this area for thousands of years, and they have been adapted to Neshoba Brook being a free-flowing river and with a wide expanse of vegetated wetlands and not a pond. So removing the dam and removing the impoundment is basically just restoring the habitat to what it has been for almost the entirety of the history of the landscape. And DEP actually, in the Wetlands Protection Act regulations, indicates that bordering vegetated wetlands, which is what would be created by removing the impoundment, is probably the most important inland habitat for wildlife in the Commonwealth. So concerns about fish and fishing opportunities. So as we mentioned, dam removal is going to really improve water quality in Neshoba Brook. This graphic is just showing kind of on the top what a normal stream looks like with no dam, and then on the bottom with a dam. So you can see improved water temperatures, better oxygenation, ability to actually move upstream and downstream of the dam. All those things are expected to improve fish habitat and fishing opportunities. And we're also interested in ideas for recreational infrastructure to support that goal as well. So there are concerns about the historical significance of the pond, and that dam removal would eliminate that. So, you know, again, the original dam has been replaced long ago. It's no longer there, but of course the pond has been part of West Concord for over 150 years. This is something that has come up on many other dam removal projects, because many dams like Warner's Pond were originally built as mill ponds and have a historic place in the community. And there are a lot of ways to address these concerns. This is another topic that we'd like input on, but a few of those are listed here, and it's something that is certainly important and would be incorporated into any project in the future. And then lastly, so two things on this slide. So one is that dam removal would allow for some kind of development within the former impoundment. That's just simply not the case. Warner's Pond is conservation land now, and it always will be, whether it's a pond or a wetland in a stream system. And then lastly, the idea that removing the dam would create more mosquito habitat. Actually, the opposite is the case, because all of the wildlife that would be supported by dam removal and new wetlands would prey on mosquitoes. And the state's Mosquito Control Task Force actually indicates that dam removal is beneficial for reducing mosquito habitat. So that is the end of the slide presentation. Where we are right now is kind of continuing to engage with the community to hear your thoughts and try to come up with a solution that is the best for the community. And also in parallel with that, advancing some modeling to answer some of those questions that we talked about earlier, as well as the engineering design to help get a better sense of the costs and potential positive and negative impacts of the project. So I think we have 25 minutes for questions and comments, and then we will release you on the boards.
Yes, please.
Paul Jameson. Could I ask a question about the significance of Ice House Pond in Acton? It seems to me that is very similar in its situation. And I'm wondering, what is Acton doing? And is it
So
that similar?
Acton did dredge Icehouse Pond, I'm going to say about 20 years ago, maybe 25. And as I understand it, water chestnut was a tremendous problem over the past year. I don't have, if there's a specific question that, the context.
Context, because it seems to me it's a very similar issue.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
David Clark from Bartlett Hill. Very interesting presentation, thank you. For years I've been an avid skater, not now, but for many years. And there were great ponds in Concord, Warner's, I mean not Warner's, but
Walden.
Walden and White and skating on the river. But they always froze late. So Warner's was always a good pond that would freeze early and was large. We have other good ponds like McCone's and Hutchins too, which are good skating. But so it would be a shame to lose that. I think your presentation is very good, but I just want to say I will lack that part, or people who are after me will lack that nice facility. One other question. We rebuilt the dam, what was it, 20 years ago, was it something like that?
I think it was 2008.
Oh, well, anyway, why wasn't this discussion brought up at that point? What has changed? Why did we rebuild it with all this reason not to that you presented?
I think that's a great question, David, and I can only speculate. I wasn't, there was a lot of people in the engineering department and natural resources were not here at the time. But as I understand it, the reason that the dam was replaced, and it was replaced with great haste, was because in, I think it was 2004, one of the dams in the Taunton River Basin buckled. And as a result of that, the state established the Office of Dam Safety. Is that accurate? And every dam, at least municipal dam, was evaluated, and any dam that was in poor condition, the municipality was ordered to fix it right now, or remove it. But, you know, I mean, it was just like, do it now, or else. I don't know what the consequences were, but, I mean, others in the community will have a better sense of that. But it was under duress that the town was told, and so I think, you know, it probably was just not considered because it was, you know, we need to fix the dam. So if others in the community have a better historical perspective on that, I would love to hear that. Thank you.
Just add to that, Delia?
Yes.
You have to put your
speaker on.
Dam removal, just in general, became more popular in around 2010, 2012. So people were just not looking at dam removals as the thing to do when in 2008 and the early 2000s at that time also. So it's a much more popular thing to look at and to do now.
And I will just say that we do have, I want to acknowledge that we do have some questions for people coming in on Zoom, and we will get to you. I'm just going to have maybe 2 more folks at the mic, and then we'll go to Zoom questions with people's hands raised. Thanks.
Hi, Dan Stapleton, 20 Conant Street, West Concord. So just a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. I'll walk back and you can answer the questions or in the future or now. But my first comment is a lot of the town was pretty committed to that pond prior to acquiring the property over at White's. So I think that's a pretty dramatic change for the residents to see it from that perspective over the last few years. You guys have made a great case for dam removal. I'm very familiar. I'm an engineer. I'm involved in dam removal projects. I understand the ecological benefits of that. And I think most people who have attended these meetings are pretty clear on that. But I think it's also pretty clear that the town of West Concord is losing an asset. And the plans that you produced from a recreational and cultural benefit have not replaced that asset. And the reason I'm bringing this up, I brought this up previously, but the reason I'm bringing it up again is that to come up with a comparable sort of benefit to the town, not the natural resource benefit, the ecological benefit, but the use benefit to the town, you really would have to include a lot of amenities. And when I asked that question before, you said, well, yeah, we could add whatever amenities, the town wants. But the reality is the amenities somewhat comparable, say, to Great Meadows are going to add another $1 million onto that project. So that has not been integrated into the cost estimates. And that's kind of, I guess I'm challenging you on that, but also putting that out as a question. Another part of the cost estimate,
would you like me to respond to that?
I'm going to just walk through and then go. I know you're going to do a lot of numerical modeling for the flow, and I don't doubt that the flood hazard zone will probably get reduced in the sort of up gradient, but you have a constraint on the river at the bridge right by Neshoba Brook, and that's an antique wall with a building that's already got settlement in the building itself due to displacement of that wall. So I'm just hoping that you're looking at the velocities there, and when you're looking at the velocities, you're looking at the geotechnical capacity of those existing structures, or adding to your cost estimate how those could be addressed, because it's already displacing and settling under current conditions. Mm-hmm. And we're getting increased intense rainfall events. You're going to project this out, I don't know, 50, 75 years. The rainfall is going to be increasing significantly from what we experience now. So those are my kind of comments to kind of get a little bit, apples to apples in terms of cost estimates. And if you want to know from a benefit perspective of what it's going to feel like to a resident, you can just go on Lawsbrook, immediately west, so it's the same wetland system. You can't even see the wetlands. So right now in your plans, there's almost no access into the space. There's I think no access, I think maybe one access for a kayak launch, but I don't remember that. You had one pier, which is simply a viewing pier, but nothing comparable, like I said, to like a Great Meadows experience. So we're kind of losing, with your current plans, we're sort of losing out on those benefits. My last question for whenever you look at that last option or any option is, and I'm not really familiar with this, so I'm just throwing out as a question, but I see a lot of references to phosphorus removal, like landscape scale phosphorus removal. I'm not talking about like your local recreational pond in your backyard. And I didn't know if that was a reasonable issue, in particular if you do a diversion, and you can kind of control that a little bit better. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess all I would say is, I think we're really early in the planning process of potential dam removal, and so I think a lot of the concerns you brought up related to the potential recreational amenities or ways to kind of keep the historical value of the pond or acknowledge it are really valid points and things that we want input from the community on, because the conceptual design that was done, it really was just what would happen if we remove the dam. We included a few very sort of basic recreational features to give some place to start, but that really is something that we want input on, and part of what we're doing right now is to come up with a more advanced state of design that will take those things into account and produce a cost estimate that includes them.
I think I would just add to that there is $3 million that has been allocated for dredging and boat launch improvements off Commonwealth Avenue. And there is the opportunity for that money to be reallocated to recreation, not all of it. I mean, hopefully some of it can go back to its original funding sources, but if it's $1 million towards recreational improvements, I think there's some real beneficial recreational improvements, amenities that you could see for that kind of money. And one of our boards, when we get to the next phase of the meeting, after the Q&A, does ask what sorts of recreational infrastructure would people want to see moving forward. So we really would like everybody's thoughts would be helpful to that.
I'd like to speak for the kids of Concord that use Warner's Pond as a recreation facility, and CMS recently launched a fishing club that goes to White's Pond, Warner's Pond, and Walden's Pond. And also ice skating in the winter happens a lot on Warner's Pond. What would recreation look like after the dam removal, especially with ice skating fishing?
Great, thank you. Yeah, so ice skating has been something that a lot of people have brought up. Certainly has been something that's been enjoyed at Warner's Pond. And, I think the pond has some recreational value now, and if the dam were removed, it would continue to have recreational value. The specific ways that it could be used would be different. But again, that's kind of one of the things that we're still working on and would really like input from the community on what are the recreational uses that people value the most, and how could a dam removal project support those and enhance them through some kind of infrastructure improvements that would go along with removing the dam.
I'm going to jump to Zoom right now, and I apologize if I don't get the order correct, but as I see it on my screen, Catherine, if you'd like to ask your question or provide a comment.
I think she's muted. You can ask to unmute.
Hi there, can you guys see me?
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Thanks. Hi, my name is Catherine Nystrom. I live at 316 Commonwealth Avenue. And just a couple of things I, really just wanted to mention the cultural and recreational significance of the pond as my family has seen it. The timeline, I certainly appreciate, it's a blip, yep, in terms of the world's timeline. But I think if you talk to the families who live around the pond, and also, if you talk to people who grew up around here, I think that it may be a blip, but it's the blip that everyone around the pond experienced, and it's the blip that maybe was formative during their childhood or now in maybe our own children's lives. So I think, it may not be that old, but I think that's the history that matters to the people who live around the pond right now. So there's that. There's also the fact that it represents working class history in Concord, which is quite underrepresented in the town, and seems to be, acknowledged in certain ways in terms of along the bike path at this point, which is great in terms of the prison and the railroads and so forth. But I think that this is a piece of it that I think deserves some attention and deserves maybe a little more consideration has been given to it up to this point. I don't know if a plaque's going to do it, but anyway, just getting that out there. And then in terms of the recreational significance, my children and myself and my husband have loved kayaking on this pond since we've moved in 13 years ago. If anyone on the panel has not been ice skating here in the winter, I encourage you to get out there. It is magical. It's just one of the most lovely experiences I think I've ever had. Walking across to Boy Scout Island, it's really special. The neighborhood gets out there to pick up hockey games, neighbors talk to neighbors, hot cocoa donuts, all of the things. It's just a wonderful community gathering space. And I'm not sure if that's really been noticed in a way that would have been gathered by the survey that's been done so far. And then just going forward in terms of just throwing it out there for the future, recreational things that are valued. Certainly fishing got my children off of Fortnite coming out of COVID, unbelievably wonderful for them, and they've gotten their friends into it. And frankly, I think the possibility.
Two people. I don't see how to.
I'll shut up.
Get your hand up. Yeah, I don't either. No, too.
The possibility that was raised of a swimming area was really important. And Giroux Park is already there. This is a town that lacked
adequate outdoor public swimming facilities. And it's something that's nagged at me since I've moved in here. It's a place where a lot of people can afford tennis clubs, private swim clubs, country clubs, but there are a lot of people who are taxpayers who would like some place to swim in the summertime that maybe can't quite swing those facilities. You know, White's Pond is a step in the right direction. Emerson swimming pool outdoor is tiny and unavailable during any useful time. To have a public swimming area, as was the plan for, you know, part of White's Pond, would be a real benefit, I think, to the community that is kind of underserved in the area by the town, in my opinion. So that's all I've got, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Phil Brewer. And can I ask that people try to keep their comments to a minute or two, just because I do see that there's a number of people that are looking to make comments, and we want to be sure that we can hear everybody. And to speak up.
And if you're on Zoom and you're not speaking, please mute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Barely.
Hi, this is Phil and Pat Brewer from Wright Road in West Concord. My wife and I are abutters, and we have also enjoyed the pond with our kids over many years. And we appreciate this opportunity, but we are disappointed in the direction this is taking, which still seems to be stacked against maintaining the pond. In particular, under the dam removal misconceptions about there being fewer or more recreational opportunities if the dam is removed, I would like that explained, how that can be possible if the pond would be reduced by approximately 90% from its current 48 acres, which was quoted, to about 4.5, my understanding. How is it possible for there to be more recreational opportunities with a 90% reduction? That is beyond belief. So it seems like the interpretation that's being made by some people about the positive results is, in our minds, under a lot of question. These conclusions do not hold up from our point of view. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I guess all I would say is rivers provide a lot of recreational opportunities as well as ponds. So I think that's kind of where it's coming from. And again, you know, things will be different with respect to recreational opportunities that exist now versus in the future. Whether they're better or worse is somewhat subjective to the individual. With the dam gone, you'd be able to paddle a canoe from the Assabet River all the way up Neshoba Brook and into Fort Pond Brook, which you can't do now, but there wouldn't be a 40-acre pond to kayak around. So it's sort of somewhat subjective, but I think part of it is the funding that...
If it is somewhat subjective, how can you state the conclusion that there's going to be more recreational opportunities based on that subjectivity? You're drawing an inaccurate conclusion.
Well, what I was going to say was, I think, you know, that's also based on the funding that's available, because dam removal sort of stands alone as the option that really could be largely offset in cost by getting grant funding. That the money that is currently allocated for managing the pond could be used to provide very extensive recreational infrastructure improvements, whereas if that money had to be used for the actual management itself of dredging or doing something else, herbicide treatments, it wouldn't be available for things like boardwalks or docks or viewing platforms or any other types of things like that. So I think that's partly where that's coming from.
So we'll take one more on Zoom. The next on my screen is Lisa Terriot.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Lisa Terrio, 118 Wright Road. So in the presentation, the beginning of this meeting, you mentioned that Warner's Pond is a conservation land now, and it always will be, whether it's a pond or wetland in a stream system. What about if areas dry up? Is the entire space guaranteed to remain protected from future development?
Yes. So it's unlikely that any of it would really dry up to be unregulated wetland resource area. But the boundaries of Warner's Pond, and I'll pull up that slide in a minute, but the parcel is a 77-acre parcel that includes the pond plus some wetlands in the southwest. And it is conservation land. So municipal parcels can be under the care and custody of the Natural Resources Commission, which means that the Natural Resources Commission, acting as a conservation commission, controls it, and no development would ever occur on a parcel that is under the care and custody of the Natural Resources Commission. There's a mechanism for that to be overturned. So if it's never happened, so if there were, somebody said we want to put a school in Warner's Pond, which wouldn't happen from a wetlands standpoint, that would have to go through unanimous approval of the Natural Resources Commission. It would have to go through, I think it's 2/3, it might just be a majority vote at town meeting, and then it would have to go through state legislative approval. So there's a lot of hurdles that it would have to go through. So I don't want to say it's impossible, because there are ways that other communities have done that. But it would be extraordinarily unlikely to happen in the town of Concord.
I mean, for me personally, I would want that guarantee that nobody is developing in that space. I mean, that's just...
Right, I understand that. That's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just had one other question. How much funding has gone into, earlier in the presentation, it was also mentioned, funding was dedicated to kind of seeing what the end result would be of dam removal, if I heard that correctly. I'm just curious how much funding has been already spent on the dam removal?
So the current contract is $250,000?
I think it's 241,
41?
something like that.
I'd have to get you an exact number, and that is to advance this process to what is called, it's a preliminary dam removal design that looks at doing transport modeling of sediments to, there's additional things that are done as part of this design phase in order to understand what dam removal would look like, so that it can be, better explained what that, what's the width of Neshoba Brook at the end of the day, what would the depth be, what would the elevations of the adjacent, wetlands be, what does that look like, so that we can, provide more information, because I think that's important for people to be able to understand. We're certainly, hearing those questions.
So the sole purpose is for them, so none of that information isn't necessary for the dam removal. That information that funding is for informational purposes?
All of that is to advance an idea of dam removal, but it is also, sort of concurrently, it provides the understanding of what a project would look like.
Right, I mean, I just feel like before project planning, it would be nice if we had more time committed to looking at all views, but that's just my opinion, so.
Thank you.
Anyway.
I think we will go to, we have a few mics up here. I don't know who was first. I thought, okay, go ahead. Yes.
Hi, Dorcas Miller. When we bought Giroux Park, we were promised a pond. I would like to have that pond. Now compared to the middle school, Giroux land wasn't very expensive, but it was something we all voted and agreed upon We want a recreational park, which has been so far badly mismanaged. And we wanted a pond where we could fish or boat or possibly swim, although I think most people don't think that's possible. I would like a pond.
Thank you. I would like to say that Giroux is back under construction. The pavilion is being framed right now, so that's Public Works is taken over that project, and the intention is that is completed this year. And there, the understanding that we have currently is that with the dam removal, there would be a 4.5-acre pond at Giroux remaining. I understand that's not a 54-acre pond, but I just want to be sure that that is understood.
I think she was before me.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, Cynthia Katz, 20 Conant Street. So this is, I think, the third meeting that I've been to, and I appreciate the changes to the presentation each time. My first question is, how many survey responses have you gotten already?
So we did a survey earlier this year that we closed after a certain period of time, and I'd have to double check the number, but I recollect that we had over 250 responses.
Okay, from Concord residents.
Primarily.
Okay, so I think there's a real difference between passive recreation and the kind of active recreation that have been what people have talked about in all three meetings I've been at. The idea of a viewing stand is, I think, maybe I'll say laughable from many of our perspectives as we think about the pond and as we think about the area. I also wonder how much the Natural Resources Commission and the town of Concord look at West Concord and the people around the pond and the people who use the pond and those of us who value the pond as valued citizens and voices in this conversation. And then my other comment is, I've heard you say, and I've heard said, we want no stone left unturned, and yet all we're hearing about is dam removal. And that, to me, is really frustrating as a citizen, as a taxpayer, as someone who voted at town meeting for Giroux, and we've paid money for that, and because it came with a pond. And for those of us, I think, who walk by the pond, who live near the pond, who view the pond, who skate on the pond, there's a big difference between a pond and that open water than a river. I go to rivers, I go to waterfalls, I do a lot of hiking, but that open water is something that's really special. And I hope that the people who live in West Concord and have been speaking will be heard, because we're the ones who live in conjunction with the pond. Thank you.
I'd like to ask that people hold applause on questions and responses, please.
Excuse me, sorry. Concord's tradition is to not clap at open town meeting, and I think similarly, we're just sharing opinions here. And my name's Gary Kleiman. I live in West Concord. I'm a West Concordian. I totally appreciate, Cynthia, where you're coming from. Jimmy, I see you here. I mean, I've been working on West Concord issues since 2009. I've been advocating for increased access to waterfront property, waterfront access for West Concordians since 2009. I've been advocating for fishing piers for kids since 2009, 2011, when we had multiple town meetings. I've been going and advocating for a lot of the same things that I hear the Friends of Warner Pond group looking for. increased fishing opportunities, increased waterfront access, increased recreational amenities for the citizens of West Concord. So I really appreciate what you're saying, and I hear you. I just want to say on behalf of, well, I shouldn't speak on behalf of the NRC, but I am one of 5 members of the NRC. We're volunteers. We're just trying to understand the issues. Yes, we have a mandate that looks at natural resources, but we are also trying to understand what's best for Concordians. We represent you, all of you. And so we're trying to look at this issue as volunteers and understand what is the best thing that responds to our mandate, but also, as a co-chair of the long-range plan, also responds to fiscal responsibility for the town, because that's one of the things that we need to be looking at, respects the history of the site, respects connectivity of the town. There are 4 or 5 values that we laid out in the long-range plan that matter. We're trying to look at all of these things in balance. That's why we've slowed down. That's why we're going to take another year before we move anything. But I would ask everybody to respect that we have opinions too, the 5 of us. And I'm open to changing my opinion. A year from now, I may be in a different place than where I am right now. Right now, I favor dam removal. I think it will enhance recreational opportunities. I think it's fiscally responsible. So I just want to say that there's another side to what West Concordians think. So thank you for sharing your opinion, and I really look forward to the next phase of this, because the purpose of these boards is to hear from everybody what your interests are, not necessarily what your position is on dam removal, but what is your interest in Warner's Pond, in the area around it. And if we can get to the root of what everybody's interests are, I think we can move the process forward to better understand what all of the alternatives are and make use of EA's analysis to understand from a scientific and technical perspective how those various interests can be best delivered to Concordians. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary.
Hi, John Bolduc, 58 Stowe Street, and former West Concord resident on Derby Street, and also former NRC member from over 20 years ago, and recently on the Climate Advisory Committee. So I wanted to bring up an aspect that I didn't see in the alternatives analysis, which was climate change. So I think as you go forward and consider the alternatives, that you also think about them in terms of how the pond will be, how it will function under a different climate in the future that's trending significantly in a warmer and wetter direction. This is obviously will affect things like the possibility of pond skating continuing there. We expect, according to the state projections, that the 100-year 24-hour storm event will increase by 50% by 2070, so going from 8 inches per 24 hours to about 12 inches. Similarly, the 10-year or 10% annual event would increase proportionally as well. And so as you do your modeling, which I was glad to hear you're working on that you, if you're not already planning to do that, factor in future rates of precipitation, because that's what you'll need to know. And I suspect that the town will want additional flood storage in that area to protect the neighborhood, to protect downstream areas. And then the other aspect I'm concerned about is just warming temperatures. So not only warms the air, but it's going to warm the water. And as you know, it's hard for warmer water to hold oxygen. And so that's going to have a water quality effect as well. So all of that, I think, needs to be factored into your decision making. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Well, first I'd like to say I think it's a wise and good move to actually push the decision back for having this meeting from the spring to the following year. So that was good and wise and logical. My name is Fred McWilliams. I've had the opportunity to live on Wright Road for a little over 50 years and had the opportunity to really explore the Neshoba Brook, the pond, for that entire time. There was a couple things that bothered me. I'm somewhat data-driven, and a lot of this is a summary slide, and I was wondering, are there technical reports with respect to the water flush rates, sediment deposits? Because I would really like to see that, because some of that is kind of confusing to me, because one of the things that was stated was that the typical flush rate for the pond is once a day. But yet, when we talk about dam removal, we're talking about an increase in flow rate, but we don't have any numbers. So I'd like to see what those numbers are, because I am fundamentally data-driven. Second aspect of that is, with the pond being lowered maybe 3 to 6 feet, I've heard different numbers, I'd like to find out what that actual number would be, is going to markedly affect upstream. So everything that we've been said, hey, we could go kayaking and everything else, the reality is, if we drop the water level significantly, it's going to be very difficult to navigate Neshoba Brook, period. And the suggestion that we could kayak and canoe on this river, which is not, it's a brook, is really going to be very difficult to do. The other aspect of it is, have we engaged the upstream towns, and has the town looked at that in terms of what its impact might be from a lower water level along the brook, and have we engaged the other towns? So overall, I think it's a really good move that we've actually moved the date back so we can actually have those type of conversations and really engage the other towns and what that impact is going to be, because I see a lot of unintended consequences for our actions, and I think we do need to take that and slow it down and put it together. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think a lot of your questions will hopefully be answered by some of the modeling and design that's underway right now. I guess a few quick things. I mean, the impounding effects of the dam only extend so far, really just kind of beyond the large wetland system that's west of the pond. So by the time you get to the upstream crossing of the rail trail, just south of Route 2, we're really beyond any impounding effects that the dam's having there. I can't remember exactly what your other questions were, but I think, yeah, the 2012 Watershed Management Plan has a ton of data and analysis based on a lot of sampling and studies that were done, and there's a link to that in this presentation. So I'd encourage you to look at it. It provides a lot of information on kind of the basic physical and chemical kind of characteristics of the pond right now.
Mary Weinberg in West Concord. I live on Hillside Avenue. We moved here in 1979, and I was told there was a pond near us. And I promised my daughter she could go ice skating. When she was 3, she had a temper tantrum in Rockefeller Center because she couldn't go on the ice. The first thing we did was buy her her first pair of ice skates. She took her first ice skating on Warner's Pond, and she was in ecstasy. That pond being there, I live on Hillside. I know it's there. I see it when I pass it. It's the soul. We can't get into Walden Pond in the summer because it's too crowded. When I was sitting over here about 5 or 6 years ago, and Mrs. Giroux had died, and her daughter was here, and there was a woman here fighting for the selectmen, for God's sakes, buy the land, we need it. And I sat there and said, oh my goodness, and the town manager, they were talking about all the wonderful things that were going to happen. And I envisioned myself, because I need water. If without that pond, what we'll see is road houses. That water is our psychological release. And when you said a blip, but it's a blip. I've been here 44 years, and when I die, that will be a big blip in my life. It's my life here. And somebody said, you have to understand how we feel living there and what this means to us. For me, looking forward to taking my chair in the afternoon on a summer's day with a book and sitting there and looking at the water will be so important for me living here in Concord, in West Concord. This is our community. And I think, if you don't mind, doing a survey on how does that water affect you psychologically? This hasn't been discussed. This, if I wanted wetlands, I could go other places. I don't want a wetland there. By the way, as far as mosquitoes, I back up to conservation land and wetlands on Hillside Avenue. Tons of mosquitoes. This is going to devalue my house, but that's the way it is. Anyway, that's what I want to say. Could you please put a form out so we can say what that water means to us just looking at it? We need it. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm placeholding for Jimmy Two Feathers, who just said that his legs can't stand so long waiting his turn, so.
Okay. Oh, for the Zoom. Jimmy Two Feathers, 303 Commonwealth Ave, and I'm actually in a butter of the pond. One question is, on the people who are deciding what happens to the pond, how many of them are abutters to the pond? I want to know that. The other piece that I'm hearing is the pond has been there a lot longer than a lot of us. I've been there for over 30 years. And I really look at it with what other people have been saying about the open space and how that's going to change. I'd like more detail on what happens to a pond that goes from 48 acres to 4 or 5 acres, and how is that going to affect the abutters, the people who live on the pond. And I want to just let you know that the reason why I'm in a butter and there's an access road to the boating area is because the town of Concord many, many years ago, before we bought the house, offered all the abutters to buy the back lots. And everybody did, except the owners of my house, so they turned it into the access road for the boat ramp. And I want to know what's going to happen to that area if there's no pond. Thank you.
So again, I think a lot of those questions will be answered as part of this process, and I appreciate the questions. I'm going to take one more question. I see that on the Zoom, Keith's iPhone, you've had your hand raised for a little bit of time, and then I think we will move into the interactive phase with the boards. And I know that there are other people who are hoping to speak, and we will be having additional public meetings. If people would like to email any questions, we're happy to take those and provide responses. Keith's iPhone, your hand is raised. Let me see if I can.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So to me, I just wanted to make one comment. It seems like the elephant in the room with all of this is that just last year in 2022, wasn't it true that you received all the permits required to dredge 35,000 cubic yards in the pond, and then went and got one bid to dredge at a cost of $9 million? Isn't that correct?
So we put out to bid what has been designed for a number of years, which was 6.5 acres, 35,000 yards. We put it out to bid. I think, at least a dozen, if not, 2 dozen contractors requested the bid. And it is accurate that we only received one response on that bid. Formally, we actually had a second response that came in informally. But in response to the request for proposals, it was one bid that was received.
Okay. And so my understanding from there is looking at the bid and the bid package, whatever. So all the material was going to be trucked to the northern edge of the minimum security prison, and this was going to cost $4.5 million. So that's about 50% of the total. And I guess no one would be here meeting right now if the bids received actually came in line with what was expected, which should be closer to the $3 million that you have. So to me, like, the elephant in the room is, why was no attempt made by the town to redevelop the scope of work for dredging and to get the cost down and to find another location to place all the dredged material?
So that was part of the alternatives analysis. When that bid came back, what we did was we put EA developed an alternatives analysis report that looked at, recognizing that high cost of the sediment transport and disposal. The proposal that was evaluated after the bid was received in the alternatives analysis report was to not move any of the sediment out of the pond at all. All of that sediment was going to be retained within the pond. Additional wetlands were going to be created. So it was basically shifting sediments within the pond. So that $4.5 million of the $9.5 million bid cost would have been, taken out. So that was evaluated, and as Alex mentioned in his presentation, that alternative just does not, it doesn't meet the project, the goals of ecological health and recreational improvements nearly as well as dam removal does.
Yeah, and I think the benefit of doing it in terms of even recreational benefits compared to the cost are I think, again, could be a matter of opinion, but seem hard to justify. We actually, after the bid came back high, we went through several different iterations of, well, what if we just dredged less? What if we left the material next to the pond in the fields instead of trucking it across the street? And had a number of conversations with contractors to kind of get their sense of, well, what would that do to the cost? And basically, the problem with dredging is that there's just a very high kind of floor of what the cost is because of the mobilization being so high. And so what was presented in the alternatives analysis was basically the most that could be done for the amount of money the town had based on a number of back and forth conversations we had with contractors. And again, in order to achieve something for that amount of money, it basically means none of the material can leave the pond. It all is just being moved around within the pond.
So what was the cost estimate to dredge and leave all the material in the pond?
I think it was like $3.5 to $4 million. It's in the alternatives analysis report, but it was in that range.
So why are we not pursuing that plan?
Well, if you look at the alternatives analysis report, it lays out all the pros and cons of that option versus dam removal versus doing nothing. And the outcome of that process was that dam removal was recommended for a number of reasons, which again are laid out in that report. And there's a link to that in the presentation if you'd like to review it.
Thanks for the questions. And I think at this point, we'll do the boards. And we have 6 boards set up around the room. And what we would like to do, they're all different. They ask different questions. And we would like you to visit each of the boards. You'll be given stickers so that you can rank. Some have the ability to put 3 stickers, some are 5, on what values are most important to you, what concerns you have. And so give us a minute for us to get set up at the boards, and then we hope everybody will just take the time to go around. Oh, and it will be on Zoom as well. But we hope everybody will go around and just put your stickers on the 6 boards, and we'll report back out after we've had a chance to collate that information. Thank you.